Welcome everyone. Today we're going to do 7 ideas on encouraging advanced analytics. And the motivation for today's presentation has to do with the dozens of clients I've worked with in the past years. Some of the common barriers that people have with implementing advanced analytics. So today actually it's going to be more of a business presentation. I'm going to show a little bit of a technology because we just had some new technology that came out this week. But I also would encourage you, if you already have some questions or things that you've encountered in the past, go ahead and queue them up. Go ahead and enter them into the GoToMeeting chat box area. There's something that you have had where you've tried to get advanced analytics going or started in your organization. Go ahead and type that in right now. I picked 7 areas where I think some of the common areas that would be potential barriers to advanced analytics, and I'm sure that if you haven't come across some of these topics, you probably should have. So here's a little bit about me. This is the, by the way, the slide deck I'm going to give to Dan and Paris, and they'll be able to post this to the website. I'm a Microsoft MVP, SaaS expert, trainer, consultant. I'm also a data scientist. Dan talked about my hard hat, and I actually have a new look here on the right side. I'm wearing the t-shirt I picked up at the Worldwide Partner Conference. That logo now is the new logo for Azure ML, which is Azure Machine Learning. And I also picked up a beaker, which I'm going to be taking my beaker now to talks. It's just kind of a fun way to connect with audiences now that we have that science connection. And then there's some information there on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I have my website. So today's premise, again, is advanced analytics promises to handle the common challenges facing organizations. So these are the questions I feel that a lot of business people are thinking about in the back of their mind. They might not be thinking about it outright, but these are topics to bring up, if you're talking to business leaders about having advanced analytics at your organization. The first one here has to do how we respond to the volume, velocity, and variety of data. And those 3 categories are often used for the big data to summarize what big data is about. Second here is how do we achieve rapid analytics? How do we make it happen in this organization? In an organization, the next point here is how do we develop technology? People are wondering about that. Another one is how do we attain more skilled analysts and data scientists? And then finally here is how do we tell stories? The stories are important in organizations because stories lead to funding. I will always say that again, stories lead to funding. People will fund a story if they understand what the story is about. All right, throughout this presentation I'm going to be using a scientific method. Now, of course, we have to have a baseline. Our baseline is our null hypothesis, and then we have an alternative as an alternative hypothesis. The baseline is kind of where we're starting, and then the alternative is where we're going. And I'm going to be asking for feedback here and see if anybody has the chance to use that chat window as we go along in these 7 steps. And the questions we have, using scientific method is there evidence to reject the null hypothesis? One question I ask too when I'm looking at research studies, how do you know that? People make a claim, and I'm going to wonder, how do you know that? Now, it's not done in a way to be mean. It's just done in a way to be, show me your evidence. Show me the evidence that you have for the claim that you're making. And then the so what question has to do with the overall, what difference does this make compared to where we were? And that's why you have to have a baseline. I'm going to be showing this as we go through the 7 steps. Now, if you want an advanced word, I'm going to be starting to talk about epistemology in my presentations. Epistemology is how do you know what you know? And science does rely on presuppositions. At the end of today's presentation, I am going to be recommending a book that's 50 years old now, but it's still one of the leading books on understanding science, and it's widely used. It's very accessible, but I think we need to up the discussion on science to be able to make the business case for machine learning or data mining. So here are my 7 areas for today, and these are the 7 ideas that we're going to have for encouraging advanced analytics. So advanced analytics promises to handle common challenges facing organizations, but it's more than just purchasing the technology, licensing it, and then making it available. The 3 areas here, I'm going to talk about 3 areas. How do we respond to volume, velocity, variety? Those are going to be the first 3. And then the 4 is going to be rapid analytics. 5, developing technology. 6, obtaining more skilled analysts. and 7 telling the stories. Today's presentation is something you could use as a checklist for going through the business case in an organization for using advanced analytics. Now, before I get into these 7 areas, actually I'm going to flip my screen and I'm going to show some of the new technology that Microsoft just made available. And you can see my desktop. So what Microsoft just released is called Microsoft Azure Machine Learning, and I would encourage you to go ahead. I just typed the Azure Machine Learning into Bing, and then these are some of the websites now that are coming up. The 3 websites I'm going to point out are the main website here, Machine Learning Preview. Microsoft is encouraging people to go ahead and sign up now for this preview with a free trial in Azure, and you'll be able to see this new technology. It does allow for R integration, and I do believe what Microsoft said is this is one of the fastest ways to get R into a production application. If you see that if you could build a project or experiment with Azure Machine Learning, you can back-end that now into an application and then make that go live because it is a web service. There's a second website here for Microsoft Research, and this has more information about Azure Machine Learning and some of the new things that are out there. There's going to be more information on the blog. I'm not going to show the video, but I encourage you to go look at this video that's been on YouTube for a few days, and then it's just a short video. It shows some of the highlights of machine learning. But let's also not forget that there is SQL Server data mining technology in analysis services. This is also the complementary technology which is already available through SQL Server licensing. What we're looking at is SQLServerDataMining.com. This is the current website, and what I'm going to show today is something nobody's seen yet because I'm involved in the project, and that is, if we saw the picture of me, but we have here a screenshot of the beta website. It's being redesigned now, SQLServerDataMining.com. They're planning to have a newsletter and planning to connect people through that method. So we will have that. Microsoft's going to be making that available hopefully in the next month. So, but you can still see the content right now. As far as the technology itself, I would encourage you to go through, and I know I'm going pretty fast, but we are recording this presentation, so you can go back and look at it. I'm looking at SQL Server Analysis Services 2014, and what I have in here is the demo projects for VentureWorks and also Contosa Retail. You can go in there and take a look right now and see examples of data mining already published out there. And of course, that's not the focus for today's presentation, but I'm letting you know that that information is available. Right now, I'm opening up an example of market basket analysis, and you can go ahead and see what some of those sample data sets add or can provide. And secondly, also, once you get your Azure account set up, one thing that I have had available is my MSDN subscription. And so when I did sign up for the new general preview for machine learning, it also uses my Visual Studio Ultimate credits. And I go down the screen. Let's see if I make this a little smaller so I can grab the bar. Okay, hang on a second. Sometimes the bar goes away. Here it is. So machine learning is going to be there on the bottom, and it's got the picture of that beaker, the one that's similar to one that I purchased for my demos. And then once you're here on your dashboard, you can go into ML Studio and then start getting involved with the Azure Machine Learning. There are some videos that show on the website, and you can see some of the videos here on instructional information on getting started. So let's go back to our business case, though. So volume. First of all, let me make sure that we're playing. So volume. So here's my baseline. If we're doing volume, if a company's overwhelmed by the data volume, a baseline response is just ignore it. I mean, that's the easy thing to do, right? You have all this volume coming in. I don't know what to do with it, and so the baseline here would be ignore it. But my idea here is that you can have an alternative, and the alternative will come in the form of technology. So you can have flat files, tape, CSV. Those are the traditional ways people have stored the amount of big data. Now we are fascinated by technology with Hadoop, and of course Microsoft's built HD Insight as a service that has ported some technology features from Hadoop to allow us to access volume. I don't think that we're necessarily going to go away from flat files or CSV. I think still see examples where people are using this technology. I also have an alternative here in terms of sampling. And I think, in terms of volume, if there's a good sampling strategy out there, we don't need to study exactly the entire volume to be able to make a decision necessarily. And I would like to see a sampling discussed more in terms of practical applications or applications that you have seen. So there's a baseline, and there is the alternative. So you can see the pattern here. So now I'm going to go to the next one. So velocity. All right, what would the baseline be? Again, ignore it. The data's coming in too fast. People can only take so much information. And now that we have the ability to store a lot of information more cheaply, or have virtual machines and have the ability to access it through other or new technologies, we have alternatives. One of the things that will become important as the velocity becomes important is streaming. So again, look at what I was saying in the first step. The first step I was saying we need to look at new technologies like Hadoop. All right. The second point here is I'm saying we need to look at streaming. Why am I saying this? Because if you have been doing advanced analytics over a period of time, you may have been working with tools like SAS Enterprise Miner, or you may have been working with tools like R or Rattle or SPSS, and a lot of standalone technologies are not going to necessarily address the issues that I have right here on the table. Volume, second one here, velocity. So you're going to have some sort of velocity answer for people because that is the barrier. So the idea here is what is going to be the plan. The plan could use streaming, or we can also, again, sampling. Why am I bringing out sampling again? Well, I'm bringing out sampling again because I think it is something people are going to have to understand and be able to explain to business users, make them comfortable sampling. I think there's no way we can do a poll right now, but I was going to ask, if we were doing live audience, I would be asking right now how many people are uncomfortable with the idea of sampling. And I've asked this question before, and a lot of people still, they're personally uncomfortable professionally, or they're not able to explain to a business user what is the confidence level we can have behind sampling. And I'm going to give you some quick ways to allay some of those concerns. Now, if you think sampling is so bad, then when you taste food in the kitchen, it's not enough to just take a taste of the food. You're going to have to eat the whole thing, all right? Because that's just a sample if you just taste the food. Or if you smell something in the room and you say, well, that's not enough. Or when you go to the doctor and they want to take a blood sample, it's like, well, it's not enough. I can't just take a sample on blood. You're going to have to take the whole thing. All right, so at a certain point, you realize that in our regular life, we make a lot of decisions based on sampling. And I'm challenging you as an audience to think through some examples that you could use from your own personal experience where people are already doing sampling and they're very comfortable with it. And then find out ways to put that in the business environment. All right, the third idea here is about variety. And okay, of course, let's baseline, ignore it. Variety has to do with the different types of data, which might be in organizations. Now, in a lot of traditional analytics applications, they were okay as long as you present it with a flattened table. All right, and even a relational structure would trip up a lot of traditional technologies. It does not trip up SQL Server Analysis Services. There's a way to put that all into your structure and bring it into Analysis Services, with what was called the Unified Dimensional Model, and now it's called BI Semantic Model. But you make these views in Visual Studio, and you can bring in a variety of data. As we are going forward into the future, we are going to see the need to have different database types on the table. Not just your flattened table, but you're going to have to know SQL, as I've told anyone working in any type of business analysis role, whether this is advanced or just basic. You're going to have to learn SQL language. And then they also have to have these NoSQL. NoSQL does not mean get rid of SQL. It means other than SQL. And the number one NoSQL application I'm going to still promote is Excel. Excel now, Microsoft is saying that there's 1.1 billion users of Office. That's how many people have access to Excel. And then we have Power Pivot, which should have a space now here on the slide deck. OLAP, which is, in Microsoft's case, done through Analysis Services. We're going to have graph databases people are going to be interested in, HD Insight and Hadoop. I just listed some examples of different database types, but this is one of the stoppers now for people wanting to analyze different data. It's not just different sources, but different types of data. And there's going to be some use cases for people to store, for example, things in graph or OLAP or tabular or some other format. And so people are going to have to look through that as far as bringing that variety into their environment. Again, I'm going to bring up sample. I don't think necessarily that someone has to do a whole bunch of observations to be able to come up with a good conclusion. Some of the work I've done in the past has been working as a mentor for the University of Phoenix in mentoring dissertation research. And an example I often bring up is if you look at actual academic peer-reviewed journal articles, there's a good number of them that use a sample size of something like 100. And if you choose the right 100, then you can do a good study. And in fact, if you look at some of the clinical drug trials, how many people they actually use. Now, some of us would want to see more, but you know, you have to use humans, and you have to have people who will volunteer for such studies. But a lot of times, drug trials will have, you know, in the dozens range. It won't be in the hundreds that will do even a clinical drug trial. How can they justify that is, again, through a knowledge and through a very well constructed research plan. So although we are in the age of big data, and I understand, you know, we have to do something for the variety, making sure the variety is represented in the sample. Okay, the variety is represented in the sample, but still, sampling will still be important. And I am recommending, you know, in terms of follow-up, to do your own study for a sampling course. Okay, achieving rapid analytics. All right, our baseline, and we can see this in a lot of organizations, is that the information technology produces and the business units consume. So we've got producers and we got consumers. And this is a common pattern now in a lot of organizations. And what we're going to have to do as far as going forward is we're going to have to work toward where business units share production and consumption with information technology. We're already beginning to see that possible. I believe it's becoming possible, for example, through cloud technology, where information technology units can give business people admin privileges in a virtual environment that will not disrupt their whole production system, for example. But they're going to need more than that. And Microsoft is responding in this area with the Power BI technology. I feel that that's one of the responses. So the approach here would be to learn the business and work on better data. So when I say learn the business, the advanced analytics will address any of the core business needs that the business units have. So if there's a question that a business unit has, I will claim right now that you can use machine learning or data mining to be able to have better insight into what the business is. When I say here work on better data, the business units are more likely to have that better data, invest that more better data if they have control of their own databases or they're able to build their own data marts. Today, we know that in a lot of organizations, people are going to do that anyway. Where have they been doing it? They have been doing it with Excel. They have been doing it with Microsoft Access. They have been doing it with other desktop tools. But in terms of where we are with my earlier slides with the volume, variety, velocity, we're now at a place where Excel is not going to store everything. Now, I agree, you still need to have Excel, and that's why I still make the argument for sampling. So it's not either or, it's both and. There's a lot of both ands going on now. And the idea here is about encouraging business units to do that. You know, this is possible now, and what I'm proposing on on all these slides in terms of these ideas will require budget, and they're going to require leadership also. And that's, you know, informing people that, you know, it's more than just licensing technology. They may have to make an investment to make this technology work. All right, developing technology. A lot of companies will say, well, I'm just going to let the vendors do it. You know, we're not in the development business. But I feel that that's going to change. I feel it's going to change as far as a competitive advantage. You know, in terms of building it, one of the things that, you know, is going to make this possible now is virtual machines, whether it's cloud, on-premise, or hybrid. a lot of the new entrepreneurial ideas in this space, in terms of analytics or in terms of new ideas, can be hosted on the cloud. And I was recently hearing a talk on a podcast. It was actually out of Stanford in their entrepreneurial podcast series, and they were saying in this one claim, this venture capitalist was saying that 96% of what they were seeing in terms of new business ideas were all cloud hosted, and like people are not even investing in data centers for these new emerging ideas. Well, I put advanced analytics into that same entrepreneurial category, whether it is at an entrepreneurial new firm or in a already established firm. You're still going to have some sort of virtual environment where you're able to test these ideas. So this is the idea here. D stands for development. R&D, research and development. Some organizations, are not necessarily having a research and development function or a department in their organization, but I feel like going forward, for people to really leverage advanced analytics, they're going to have to put some effort into the research and development. There's many case studies out there, how it was done well, how it was done poorly. You can look up 3M, see what they've done over time. I recently saw a history of Silicon Valley, and of course that came out of Fairchild Electronics. One of the things that happened right before people split from Fairchild and formed Intel was that they dropped a lot of the research and development funding. There they had the early form of integrated circuits, and they decided to drop that, and they just lost people. They said, okay, that's it, we're leaving, we're going to go somewhere where we can do our research and development. So my argument here is I think that there has to be inside the organization commitment to be able to do that, to keep those functions in-house, and also even keep people from leaving and starting their own company. Okay, talent. Now everybody says, I don't know where I'm going to get talent. All right, baseline thing here is just ignore it. Let's assume things are going to go forward and we're just going to get by with the people we have. What I have here as far as ideas, here's your alternatives. Buy. You can buy talent, and that means just go out in marketplace and just put out new job postings, and everybody says, it's hard to find, somebody that might be in this area. Now you can rent talent, and I know what that's like because I am actually rentable talent. I've been working as a consultant, so you can get consultants in there to into your organization, and maybe even in there to train people in the organization in new technology. Create talent. I was recently at a data science meeting, and someone introduced me to one of the older guys there. Turns out that he had been a developer at this company for many years, for at least 20 years. And what they had done is they had this new data science technology that they were investing in. So they decided, this guy's shown that he's really sharp and good. We're going to send him to this training, and he now is one of the few dozen people who even understand this technology, this particular new technology in the whole world. So now he is now a data scientist. Yesterday he was a developer. Today he's a data scientist. Can that happen? Sure. I think people should go to training and certainly just for technology or science sake, there's going to be a lot of work out there, and creating it is important. And the last step I have here is about leading. Well, leadership's important because again, I would say if people are not led, they're going to find a different way to express their talent, and you certainly wouldn't want to lose people. So as far as obtaining talent, these again are ideas for alternatives. It is part of the discussion because again, you don't want this technology to land and then people are not going to know what to do with it. Even for the new Azure machine learning, one of the messaging points is that you don't necessarily need data scientists here over in the corner. Well, maybe you don't need the data scientists in the corner. Now you need to have somebody who is going to do the data science, though. Who's going to do this science? And it's not just push-button technology where you just push the button and then, results spit out. It's going to require a lot of creativity and all the other points. So there are ways to do that. I have, in the past, provided links to online learning. As I showed earlier on the Azure Machine Learning, they're sharing videos online of how to use that technology. But there's other ways to learn even through books or through online courses. But this is an area of investment in order to make the advanced analytics work. All right, the last point I have here, the 7th point, and of course we're coming quickly up to the question time. So again, if you have some questions in mind about making analytics work in your organization, I would certainly like to hear them. All right, the stories I think are important because stories are where funding can happen. So I have actually two baselines. My first baseline here is an internal focus because we're just like everyone else. So the idea here is that, you know, as far as stories, well, we're just going to concern ourselves with our own organizations. Pretty much the philosophy here, all organizations are the same. There's really nothing to learn from the other organizations because we're just the same as everybody else. You know, we have processes going on. Everybody's using Microsoft Office. We're all kind of the same. We've even had people here who worked at other places, and we don't really feel like we need to reach out and talk to other people. So that's baseline number one. Okay, the second baseline here is actually a different idea, and that is that everybody's unique. Every organization's different. There's nothing to learn from other places, and we're so unique that we don't really feel like there's anything else that we could learn from another place. And what I'm giving as an alternative here is I still think it's important to do what all of you are doing, and that is to reach out beyond your organization and see what can be learned. Ask yourself, what can we learn? I'm not saying that there's necessarily something to learn in every technology conference or every industry conference that you might go to, but ask yourself, what can we learn? What can we share? And that's where the benchmarking and the networking can happen. And these are places where people can share information. In terms of the Microsoft world, Dan explained some of the options through PASS. And if this is the first PASS event you've been to, I certainly would encourage you to look at sequelpass.org to see if there's any meetings in your area or what other online meetings that PASS hosts and sponsors. Microsoft has their own conferences. We have TechEd, which happens in the U.S. and also Europe and other areas. And then we also have other conferences through PASS, like the PASS Business Analytics Conference, which has been now in the spring, and then SQL PASS Summit, which is going to be in November of this year. So these are some of the options for conferences, and I would also encourage people to do other types of conferences. I've spoken, for example, at Predictive Analytics World, which is more of a conference focused on the business problem more than the technology. In fact, they wanted us to tell a story in a way that would generalize to whatever technology people are using. So going to something like Predictive Analytics World would be a recommendation. So again, I think I'm covering now the 7 areas that are around the technology and giving you an idea of what might need to be a checklist if you were a consultant or if you were an employee in an organization trying to get advanced analytics or machine learning started. Now, I'm going to give you my one book to read, and then we'll go to questions, and then I have a final closing slide, which I'll show right when I'm signing off. But the book I want what you read is Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And this is a classic book that introduced a word into a common vocabulary, and the word is paradigm. Well, you say, well, where did the word paradigm get used? Now, actually, what's happened as of late is paradigm has become so overused and misused it almost has no meaning. All right, so that point aside, it's become such a buzzword. The book itself is a good history. It goes into idea of the science, the philosophy behind science, and how scientific revolutions happen. And I would also encourage you to look at the actual history of how some of the scientific developments happen. You know, a lot of them happen through trial and error. Trial and error is still very important for science and scientific process. If you look at anything from Edison's light bulb to any type of scientific development process, the one I was bringing up earlier was the history of Silicon Valley. You want to do an interesting study on where did the transistor come from and how the integrated circuit was developed. Those are good stories to see how science can move forward or has moved forward in the past. And it will parallel same types of ideas that you would have for any of your science projects. All right, so I want to stop right there and maybe go to Dan and see if we have any questions or specific ideas. In fact, certainly we would not like any questions on the core ideas here about encouraging advanced analytics, but if anyone also wants to ask any questions about Azure Machine Learning or SQL Server data mining, I'll be happy to take those also.
All right, thanks, Mark. Looking through the questions, we don't have any currently set up. So if anyone has any questions for Mark, well, maybe we'll start getting some in now as people start taking the time to publish some questions here.
Okay.
Looks like we do have one here from Paul, your colleague. I talk to people at a lot of companies who don't think that they're not ready for, who don't think they're not ready for advanced analytics because they can't move beyond a certain data quality or maturity bar. What advice can you give about getting a business to a good enough state to move forward?
Right. Okay, so there's two approaches. One could be, I think part of this comes down to personality. Some people are good enough by going through a thought experiment. You just give them a thought experiment and some demos, and they're good to go. And if they saw some good demos on what the technology could do, that might be good enough. There's other types of people I work with that they just cannot buy it based on a thought experiment. They actually have to see some actual examples. And I still would point out the conferences that I mentioned to you earlier. Some people just cannot do it unless they actually go to a conference and meet somebody that's done something. The two examples I had were the technology conference type or the industry conference type. Industry would be along the lines of their verticals. So if they were in healthcare, they would want to go to healthcare analytics conference. There's even like one for sports analytics, for people who do professional sports websites or perhaps are managing teams, for example. So there's all types of verticals out there. Sometimes they just need to meet people that are in a similar business and get excited about what other people are doing with analytics. So that's how I would want to approach that.
All right, sounds great. Thanks, Mark. We have another question here. It says, statistics can have a bad rep with some folks from history. How do we get over this?
Yes, that is a great question, and I that will continue to come up. And the reason is because I don't know if I had it on my slides here. Okay, on the slide I'm showing here, science relies on presuppositions. This is why. So what are the presuppositions? What the presuppositions have to do with is where the data collection comes from in the first place. We're making decisions all along the scientific process of where this data comes from, how frequently, who looks at it, who cleans it, and then how it gets presented. So even before the objective part of calculating means and standard deviations and developing models, there were some presuppositions, especially on the data collection, that have to do everything with how it turns out. And I know people blame the statistics because that's the last piece of the engine to touch the data before somebody's making some sort of claim. But always as important is ask where did this data come from. So I go back to my question here of how do you know that? And I would also caution people to say, well, where did this data come from? On what basis do we have this information? It is an important question to continue to ask and I think continue to try to improve. In terms of allaying people's fears, it's still going to go back to data. Where did this data come from? How do we know this to be true is still the question we have to answer, whether we're using any advanced analytics or we're just using some more mainstream business intelligence technology.
Okay, here's another question. When looking to acquire data science talent, what are the key skills and experience to look for, barring a master's in data science?
Okay, yeah, it's good to get a master's, and if you can get a doctorate, that's even better. Yeah, there are some good analytics programs out there. I will make a citation to where you can find where some of those programs are in terms of what those are listed. If you go to kdnuggets.com, you can see a list of educational programs available for people who are talented in that area. I would, just like with any other technical hiring, it is important, I feel, to have people on the hiring committee that understand the data science language and are able to articulate some of the questions to ask for that person. So in addition, so usually an interview, a technical interview will have two parts. One part has to do with the business side, with interviewing that person among the people that they would be working with, and just to assess fit. And that just generally has to do with whatever that company or organizational culture is. The second part has to do with the technical interview or an aspect. And I don't know about everyone's experience. As a consultant, I've often been drawn into interview situations several times throughout my career where I was the technical interviewer, there to ask questions of the person. One of the things you do want to see is you want to see samples of previous work. I feel like in all technical interviews, somebody should come in with a portfolio of information, things and examples of projects they have done. But I will also offer this word of caution, because what I've seen in the marketplace right now, because the term data science is so hot, if you actually look at the actual things that people are asking for on the list, they are so enormous that you'd have to have like 3 careers spanning like 3 lifetimes to be able to master everything. Like they want someone for hardware, software, technology, science, research. It's just like a lot's on there. And what some of the more reasonable job descriptions have been is that they will go ahead and list those things. Okay, they're not going to be restricted by listing everything that they would want to have in that area. But then they're going to say something like, well, we would like to have someone who's skilled in a few of these areas, maybe not every area. So maybe they're not a full expert in a whole area. And I think what I'm hearing right now, too, from the more successful implementations is that they will get a list of qualities that they would want, and then they will have actually a team. So they're going to have hire a team where each person added is going to add new skills. So in other words, if there were 7 areas, the first person is strong in 3 areas, go ahead and hire them, and you're going to have to assume that you're going to have to hire several people so that you're not going to have strong coverage in all 7 areas. So then the next person would have to have, the other complementary strengths. So again, so I said 2 things. One is that, to summarize what I've just said, have technical interviewers who are able to understand the technology and the science background. And again, you can have those internally. You can rent those people, okay, to be their technical interviewers. Secondly, you can. My recommendation is to be building teams. And I know that might not be the answer people want to hear, because it's like, oh, Mark, I thought I could just do this with one person. And maybe that's your budget right now. Okay, great. Or maybe you don't have the budget to hire. Maybe you can only have the budget for a consultant, just to start off, ramp up part-time. But eventually, I think anyone takes data science to being a core part of the business, they're going to need to build a team.
Okay, we've got a couple more here. The next one, there's so many tools, DAX, Power Query, Excel, data tools, and now Microsoft Azure. It's very hard to keep up with all that. Which one should I stay with?
Which one should you stay with? That's a great question. Okay, so if you had to pick one skill in this area that I think is going to survive the longest, it's going to be .NET. I think still people are going to have to know how to program. So if you do not know how to program and you want a leading role in where the future is going, I still feel that that's the more important thing. Now, learning .NET is important because then you'll understand how all these other technologies are built, and also you're going to have to understand how to modify them. Part of the Microsoft's design, for example, with Power BI, is to provide already a platform for things that people used to have to build. They tried to do that. They tried to do what Power View is, or they tried to do what I don't know if anyone attempted to do what Power Pivot does, because that's pretty advanced. Mm-hmm. But they did try to do things that are in Power Query, or even visualizers like Power Map. Try to do some sort of 3D mapping environment. It is important to know what these technologies are, so the easy thing as far as shopping is to at least I would recommend keep up with the technologies that comes out. As Microsoft comes out with new things, there will always be the video where you can do like a 1-hour video to brief yourself on what a new technology is. And then you can think about it. It's like, well, am I really interested or excited about that? And I'm going to say also, technology is going to require investment of skill in yourself and keeping your skills fresh. In terms of science, I recommended a book that's 50 years old. I'm sure probably most of this audience today probably has not read this book, which you can get on the scientific method. The scientific method is not going away. Algorithms are not going away, and also programming as a skill is not going away. So while the technologies may change, I feel that staying closer to the mathematics through programming or through algorithms or through that core science is going to be the better way.
All right, great answer. Okay, we've got one more here. My business is only interested in deliverables and ROI. What kind of story are you telling to get funding?
Right. Okay, I'm going to go back to the stories page. I am going to now recommend something I did not say earlier. There is a book out there called Predictive Analytics by Eric Siegel. And this book has a couple dozen examples of the ROI on data mining and machine learning. And so I would and it has several examples by industry. So if you want already done list of what has been the demonstrated ROI for data science, I would recommend that specific book. But I would also, again, look at some of these technology conferences and industry conferences and look for, I would look for industry examples. All right, I would not be focusing on technology. I would be looking for, like if you're in healthcare, I would be looking for a healthcare example. Or if you're in financial services, looking for that type of example. And these examples are in that book I just mentioned, Predictive Analytics by Eric Siegel.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions we have right now. I know for all those that are still on, in the chat area, I did post, if you want to get the opening slide deck, I did post the download for that. Otherwise, I believe, Mark, you said you had some closing statements to make?
Yeah, so let me go to my closing words of wisdom. So my words of wisdom slide. So we have these stories here. Stories will lead to funding. I gave you one book to read, and I'm going to give you a quote. Quote is from Tommy Lasorda, manager of the LA Dodgers, former manager of the LA Dodgers. Okay, now this is the approach you need to take. You can make it happen. You can let it happen, or you can wonder what happened. All right, so this is my approach here, these ideas. I think we need to be more proactive and not just assume that machine learning will sell itself. Even with all the examples I said, it's still going to require some business leadership, understanding the business, and being able to translate business concerns into action. And hopefully provided some steps and ideas for you to take that to the next level.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate your time. I know you just got back from the World Conference there. And I appreciate all your insights that you provided, all the tips and advice, as long as the extra follow-up information that people can take a look at those books that you recommended. And I believe that will be it. Unless I'll see if we have any other last questions here. I think we covered them all. I see we do have one more new one here. If you want to take one more question
Sure.
Before we part.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right. Lee's asking, do you think programs like RapidMiner or such can reduce the need for scientists using unpacked algorithms, or I'm sorry, using pre-packed algorithms?
Reduce the need for scientists. Okay, so let me answer that question in general, and that is that some of the leading, so the PhD level data scientist, one thing that level of person needs to be able to do is to be able to create a new algorithm or to be able to tweak or make a new mathematical approach. And I feel for the vast majority of business cases, people are not needing to do that, whether they're going to use R or RapidMiner or SPSS or any technology or Azure Machine Learning. In fact, Azure Machine Learning has already ported R language into it. One thing they announced at the Worldwide Partner Conference is they're also going to enable that to work with Python. And they've already announced that they were going to do that. And also they said, I asked about .NET, and they said they're going to extend it to .NET. I said, well, good. We have everything now. I can just write it. So going back to that data scientist, are you going to need someone to write algorithms? No. But on the other hand, are you going to need people who know the scientific method? And I would say that the answer is yes. And I think for business analysts that are working today, for people who are going to want to work in this analytics field or put that name onto themselves, what I would expect from them is to be able to tell me, be able to answer these scientific method questions. Be able to demonstrate an evidence behind things and not just show me a graph. It's like, oh, I just punched the bunts together and this graph spit out, you know, and I don't know what it means. But they're going to have to be able to demonstrate, how do we know things? Where are these numbers coming from? And, you know, we look at a tool like RapidMiner. RapidMiner is open source. And well, they have open source and paid versions. It's a very popular tool. Azure Machine Learning is going to compete with that because it's going to scale. It's going to scale to the clouds and scale to any type of application API. So an application could call Azure Machine Learning. On the back end could be Microsoft's tools, R, Python, eventually .NET. And that's going to be a pretty compelling competitive strategy. But as we are going forward, people are going to need to become scientists. You know, just admit it. You go to a science school. In fact, I've tested audiences with this. How many people in the audience have a degree, like even a bachelor's degree, and has the word science in the title? Then I ask people, how many of you consider yourself scientists? Like, nobody wants to raise their hand. It's like, wait a minute, you got a degree that says science on it. And you might not be, you know, I'm not Einstein, I'm not Stephen Hawking, but you know, if you have science in your degree, I feel like, you know, you should be able to represent science. And to be able to do that, you know, basic areas of the scientific method, I think, are more important to focus on than, you know, what is the particular technology.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I think that'll wrap it up for our July meeting here. Just a reminder that our next meeting will be on August 21st, so stay tuned. We should be getting that information out in the next couple of weeks. And also a reminder that this recording will be posted on the YouTube channel, as well as the slide presentation will be uploaded to the site that we have, so you have links for both of those. So go ahead and check that out shortly. Hopefully we'll have that in the next day or so. Thanks everyone for joining, and I appreciate everyone attending, and we'll see you next month. Thanks very much.